Follow me, thus, please. She said it barely above a breath, a 20-year-old woman standing in the doorway of a biker clubhouse in a Montana blizzard, her coat torn open. Her hands blue from cold, a mud-stained map pressed against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Cole Mercer caught her before she hit the floor. And in that moment, with 170 men watching in absolute silence, everything they had planned for that night ceased to matter. If this story moves you, subscribe to our channel and follow along until the very end. Drop a comment and tell us what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The night had started the way most January nights started, at the Hells Angels clubhouse outside Greyhaven, Montana, with the smell of coffee, the low growl of men talking over each other, and the particular kind of warmth that only comes from a building full of people who have chosen, for better or worse, to belong to something together. Cole Mercer stood at the center of it all, not because he demanded the space, but because he had always been the kind of man that space organized itself around. 48 years old, built like someone who had once been required to carry other people out of situations most people never survived. His face had the specific quality of a man who had stopped being surprised by life somewhere around 30 and had since replaced surprise with a slower, more deliberate kind of attention. Tonight, the 170 members of the Hells Angels were not riding. They were loading. Boxes of canned goods, winter medicine blankets, propane canisters, and children's boots lined the walls of the main hall. There were families scattered throughout the mountain range, surrounding Greyhaven elderly couples who hadn't been to town in 6 weeks, a woman raising 4 children in a cabin that hadn't had reliable road access since November, a retired school teacher named Harmon Briggs who hadn't answered his phone in 5 days. Every winter, the club ran the supply convoys into the mountain communities that the county forgot about once the roads became inconvenient. It was not a charity operation. It was not organized by a nonprofit. It was just what they did. It had started 15 years ago when Cole's own father had been stranded for 3 days after a storm sealed his property road, and not a single county vehicle had responded to his calls. Cole had driven a snowplow through 12 miles of drifts to reach him. After that, he simply kept doing it. "We're short on propane for the Anderson run," said Decker Walsh, Cole's vice president, dropping a clipboard on the table without looking up. Decker was 43, had a voice like gravel sliding down a metal chute, and was the only person in the clubhouse who consistently challenged Cole's decisions and lived to describe the experience as comfortable. "Anderson family hasn't confirmed their home. Want to split the load or run the whole route?" "Run the whole route," Cole said. "If they're not home, the supplies go to the Briggs cabin instead." "Briggs hasn't answered in 5 days." "I know. That worries you." "It worries me?" Cole agreed. Decker wrote something on the clipboard. "We leave at midnight. We leave at midnight." That was when the front doors opened. The cold came in first, a wall of it, dense and immediate, carrying the particular bite of a blizzard that had been building strength for 2 days and was now operating at its full intention. Every man in the room turned toward the doors. She was standing in the opening, and for just a moment, before anyone moved, the entire room was absolutely still. She was young, genuinely young, the kind of young that registers as wrong in a place like this, like a detail that doesn't belong in the picture. Long, golden blonde hair completely soaked and matted against her face and shoulders. Pale skin that had passed pale and arrived somewhere closer to gray. Blue eyes that were open and aware in a way that took immediate effort, the look of someone who had been forcing themselves to stay conscious through sheer will for a long time. Her coat was torn along the left shoulder. Her boots were wrapped in what appeared to be strips of canvas, and she was holding a folded map against her chest with both hands pressing it there, like a wound she was trying to keep closed. She took one step forward. Cole was already moving. He crossed the room in 6 strides and caught her just as her knees began to go, his right arm taking her weight before she reached the floor. She grabbed his leather vest with both hands, those near-frozen hands, the fingers white at the tips, and she looked up at him with those exhausted blue eyes, and she said it. "Follow me, please." Well, just those 3 words. Barely a sound, but they landed in the dead silence of the room like a stone dropped into still water, and every man present felt the ripple. "Get the medical kit," Cole said without raising his voice. "Get Renner." Renner was their paramedic. He appeared from the back hallway in under 40 seconds, took one look at the situation, and went directly to the young woman's hands. "She's got early frostbite," he said. Fingers, maybe toes. I need warm water and towels. People moved. Within 2 minutes, the young woman was sitting near the heating unit. Her boots removed her hands submerged in a basin of warm water that Renner monitored carefully, a blanket across her shoulders. Someone had pressed a mug of hot broth into her hands, and she was holding it with the careful gratitude of someone who understood the value of heat in a way that most people only learn through genuine deprivation. Cole pulled a chair close and sat directly across from her. He didn't crowd her. He didn't demand anything. He just waited, giving her the time she needed to let the warmth reach her enough to think. The room around them had gone quiet again. Not the silence of indifference, the silence of 170 people paying absolute attention while pretending not to. "What's your name?" Cole asked. "Grace," she said. Her voice was steadier now, the shaking working its way down from violent to manageable. "Grace Holloway." "How far did you come, Grace?" She looked at him, calculating something, deciding something. 8 miles from the Pinebrook Forest Road. Renner looked up from her hands. 8 miles through a blizzard on foot at night. He did not say what he was thinking, but his expression said it for him. "You walked," Cole said, not a question. "My car went into a drainage ditch 2 hours outside of town. My phone lost signal before I could call anyone." She paused. "I knew where your clubhouse was. My father told me once. He said if I was ever in real trouble and couldn't trust the people I was supposed to trust, this was the place to come." "Who's your father?" "Daniel Lee Holloway." She watched his face. "He's a county surveyor. He went missing 18 days ago." Cole had heard the name. Not with any specific detail, but county surveyor was a position you recognized in a small Montana community the way you recognize the school principal or the pharmacist. Someone whose work touched the infrastructure of ordinary life without being particularly visible. What happened to him? Grace wrapped both hands more firmly around the mug. She was warming up enough now that emotion was starting to come through, the way feeling returns to cold skin painfully, and in an order that isn't necessarily comfortable. He found something. He'd been doing surveys around Silver Crown Mountain for the past year, routine boundary work for the county, and he started noticing things that didn't match. Old records, original deeds, property boundaries that didn't line up with the official maps. He started documenting it. Documenting what exactly that the maps had been changed. She said it simply, without drama, the way someone states a fact they have had 18 days to sit with. The official county survey maps. Someone had altered them, changed property boundaries on paper to move land that didn't belong to them into a company called Black Ridge Mining. The room was still, pretending not to listen. Cole could feel everyone listening. "How much land?" he asked. 14 ranch properties, some of them families that had been on that mountain for 3 generations. Black Ridge declared the land unsafe, drainage problems, unstable slopes, and the county condemned the properties. The families sold for almost nothing because they had no choice. And then the official unsafe designations disappeared from the record, and Black Ridge filed new surveys showing the corrected. She stopped herself, used the word deliberately. Falsified surveys showing the land as perfectly stable and well-drained. Because it always was. Cole leaned forward slightly. "And your father documented this." "He spent 8 months documenting it. He made copies of the original deeds. He recorded survey coordinates. He identified specific measurement alterations in the county records." She set the mug down and pulled the folded map from where someone had placed it on the table beside her. "He left this with me. 3 weeks ago, he came home from the mountain and he looked at me and he said, 'Grace, if I stop answering my phone, you take this map to Cole Mercer.' He said it like he knew. He said it like he'd already thought through every possibility except the one where nothing went wrong." Cole looked at the map but didn't touch it. "And then he stopped answering his phone. 18 days ago. And you went to the sheriff." Grace's expression shifted. Not dramatically. Just a closing in the way a door closes when someone realizes they've been looking at it from the wrong side. "I went to the sheriff. Sheriff Rourke told me my father had probably gotten disoriented in the weather and that they were looking into it. He told me not to go up the mountain. He told me the road was dangerous." She paused. 3 days later, 2 county deputies came to my house and asked to look at my father's work materials. They said it was routine part of the investigation. I let them in. They took 3 boxes of files, but not the map. My father had told me to keep the map on my body. Even if someone asked for it, even if the person asking had a badge. She looked at Cole steadily. I kept it. Cole sat back. He was quiet for a moment, turning the shape of what she'd told him in his mind, feeling for the edges of it. Beside him, he could sense Decker doing the same thing, standing slightly behind Cole's right shoulder clipboard, forgotten every part of his attention on this young woman. What happened tonight? Cole asked. Someone came to my apartment. Her voice remained steady, but something moved through her eyes that was harder to name. Two men, no uniforms. They knocked at 9, and when I didn't answer, they tried the window. I was already leaving through the back. She glanced down at her coat at the tear along the shoulder. I caught it on a fence. I ran to my car and drove until the ditch took it, and then I walked the rest of the way here. You walked 8 miles through a blizzard, Decker said from behind Cole. His voice was not challenging. It was something closer to stunned respect. My father told me Cole Mercer was a man who would never abandon someone trapped on a mountain, Grace said. She looked at Cole directly. I believed him. Cole held her gaze for a moment, then he stood. He walked to the window. Outside, the storm had solidified into the specific, relentless quality of a Montana blizzard that is committed to its purpose. Visibility was measured in feet. The wind moved the snow in horizontal sheets. He stood there for 10 seconds. 20. Thinking. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. County Sheriff's Department. He answered it and put it on speaker without asking permission, because the 170 men in that room deserved to hear whatever was about to be said. Mercer. Sheriff Wade Rourke's voice came through with the particular authority of a man who had spent many years using his position to substitute for any need to be persuasive. I'm calling as a courtesy. We've had an avalanche event on Blackstone Pass and the road is closed. The entire mountain approach is sealed. I need to make sure you and your people understand that any attempt to access Silver Crown Mountain tonight would be not only dangerous but illegal under the Emergency Access Ordinance. Are we clear? Cole looked at Grace. Grace met his eyes and gave him the smallest, most precise shake of her head. No avalanche. When did this happen, Wei? Cole asked. Earlier tonight. We've got crews on it. Should be cleared in 48 hours. Which side of the pass? A brief pause. Upper eastern face. Cole kept his voice completely level. That's interesting. I had a guy up near Briggs' cabin this afternoon on a snowmobile. No reports of anything on the eastern face. Must have happened after dark. These things can happen fast, the sheriff said. Just making sure you know the mountain is closed. I appreciate the call, Cole said, and ended it. He turned back to the room. Grace was watching him. So were 170 bikers in varying arrangements of standing, leaning, and sitting, filling every available inch of the main hall. Cole looked at the map Grace had carried 8 miles through a Montana blizzard. He looked at her hands still red from the water treatment, but no longer shaking. He looked at the room. The sheriff just told me Blackstone Pass is closed due to an avalanche, he said. That's a lie. There was no avalanche. Nobody spoke. Grace Holloway's father has been missing for 18 days. He was investigating land fraud involving county officials and a mining company. Tonight, armed men came to her apartment to take his evidence. She walked here through a blizzard to ask for our help. He stopped. He didn't need to say more. The room understood the shape of this. We were going to make supply runs tonight anyway, Cole said. The mountain families need those supplies regardless. Anyone who wants to ride on the convoy, you know where the trucks are. Anyone who doesn't want to ride, I understand completely, and I want you to know I mean that without any reservation. This is voluntary. This is dangerous. And if it goes wrong, it will go wrong publicly, and the people trying to bury this will use every tool they have to make us the villains in the story. He paused. Anyone sitting down? The room was still. Not a single man moved toward a chair. Decker made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Hell of a night to be a biker, he said. Cole looked at Grace. Can you guide us to where your father was working? She stood. The blanket fell from her shoulders, and she didn't reach for it. She picked up the map. Yes. Then we leave in 10 minutes. Cole turned toward the room, and his voice settled into the register he had learned a long time ago in places far from Montana, the voice that moved people without needing to push. Medical van goes in the convoy. Renner, you're loaded with trauma supplies. I want 2 snow plows at the front and 2 mechanics in the rear truck. Body cameras on. Everyone charges their devices. Decker, get the CB radios out of storage, all of them. I want a channel open that county dispatch can't monitor. You think they're listening to our regular channels? Decker asked. I think someone jammed our radio signal on the last mountain run and never admitted to it. Cole moved toward the gear room. I'm not assuming anything is open tonight. The clubhouse shifted from stillness to organized motion in a way that was almost beautiful. 170 people who had done complicated, dangerous things together many times before moving into their roles without instruction or hesitation. Grace stood watching. Renner appeared beside her with dry clothes donated from the Lost and Found box, practical and warm, and a pair of insulated boots that were 2 sizes too large, but better than canvas strips. She accepted them without argument, changed quickly, came back to the main hall looking like someone who had converted the last hour from ordeal to evidence. She found Cole at the gear table loading a pack. I need to tell you something, she said before we go. He looked up. The property at the center of the fraud, the first parcel that Blackridge acquired, the one that gave them the legal foothold for every boundary change that followed. She stopped, started again. I was going to tell you when the time was right, but I think the time is now. Cole waited. The original purchase was legitimate, Grace said carefully. Someone sold it voluntarily about 12 years ago. They didn't know what Blackridge intended to do with it or what it would be used to justify them. My father found the deed, the name on it. She met his eyes. Is it going to be a problem if I tell you the name? Cole had the specific stillness of a man who has learned not to react to news before he has heard all of it. Tell me. Robert Mercer. The name sat between them in the air. Cole did not look away. He did not change expression. Something moved through him that was not surprise and was not shame and was not exactly either of those things, but was related to both a reckoning, quiet and private and immediate. That's my father's name, he said. I know. He sold land on Silver Crown 12 years ago, after my mother passed. I knew about the sale. I didn't know who he sold it to. Cole picked up his pack. Put it on. Does that change what I'm willing to do tonight? Grace studied him. Does it? No, Cole said. It changes what I'll have to answer for afterward. But it doesn't change tonight. Grace held his gaze for one more second. Then she nodded. My father was right about you. Cole moved toward the doors. Let's go find him. Outside, the convoy was already forming in the lot, motorcycles, pickup trucks. 2 large snowplows borrowed from the Volunteer Fire Association. The medical van with its amber running lights cutting through the white dark, a flatbed repair vehicle carrying tools and chain equipment. Engines running, headlights pressing against the blizzard. 170 people who had stepped forward when asked. Not for money, not for recognition. Because stepping forward was what they did. Grace walked out into the snow and turned to face the convoy. The wind took her hair, and she didn't reach for it. She looked back at Cole. He gave her a single nod. She turned toward Blackstone Pass and started walking, and a moment later the convoy moved to follow. The night swallowed them gradually, first the sound absorbed by the snow, then the lights dimmed by the density of the storm, until they were just a glow moving slowly through the white dark. A young woman in a folded map and 170 people who had decided that the mountain's secret was worth knowing, even if finding it meant facing everything that the people who buried it were prepared to do to keep it buried. Inside the last truck, Decker Walsh picked up a CB radio and tested the frequency. Static, then a clear signal. He keyed the mic. All vehicles, this is Convoy Command. We are rolling. Keep your spacing tight and your cameras hot. If anything goes wrong tonight, we want everything on record. He set the radio down, looked out through the windshield at the lights ahead. What do you think is up there? Asked the young biker in the driver's seat, a kid named Torres who was 26 and had only been with the club for 8 months. Decker watched the convoy moving through the storm. Something someone tried very hard to make disappear, he said, which means it's probably the most important thing on that mountain. Torres kept his eyes on the road. And if they try to stop us, Decker picked up the radio again, then 170 people will be there to make sure stopping us takes more than they've got. The blizzard closed in around the convoy. The mountain waited. And somewhere beneath Silver Crown in a cold and failing darkness, a man who had trusted his daughter with the truth had been waiting 18 days for someone to come. The convoy had been moving for 11 minutes when Torres said over the CB, "Something's wrong with the signal." Cole heard it through his earpiece and immediately looked at the handheld frequency monitor clipped to his jacket. 3 minutes ago, they had clear transmission on every channel. Now, two of their four active bands showed nothing but flat static, not the natural interference of mountain terrain flat static like a wall. Something was generating it. "Decker," Cole said into the radio. "I see it." Decker came back immediately. "Channels 3 and 7 are gone. Someone's running a jammer." "How far out are we from the pass?" 4 miles, maybe 4.5. Cole pulled his motorcycle alongside the lead truck and signaled to Grace through the passenger window. She rolled it down. The cold hit her face like a slap, and she didn't flinch. "Someone is jamming our radio frequencies," Cole said. "It started the moment we hit the county road." Grace absorbed that without panic. That was the thing about her, that Cole had already started to understand. She processed bad news the way people do when they have been sitting with bad news for 18 days and have exhausted the ability to be shocked by it. My father documented interference events in his last notebook. He thought the county was using a portable jammer to prevent communication in the mountain zones while they were moving equipment. Moving equipment for what? He wasn't sure, but the interference always preceded activity near Silver Crown. She looked at the road ahead. "It means someone knows we're moving." Cole absorbed that. "Who else knew about tonight?" "Nobody I told." Her voice was level. My people don't talk," Cole said, then more slowly, "but someone was watching your apartment." The thought landed between them like a stone. If they had watched Grace's apartment, they had watched her leave. And if they were prepared enough to run a jammer on a county road at midnight, then tonight had not surprised them. They had anticipated it. Cole dropped back and called Decker. "We need to assume they know our route. Switch convoy to CB Channel 11, the old volunteer fire frequency. County dispatch doesn't monitor it. And I want someone to start documenting every piece of this. Every camera on every timestamp confirmed everything we see goes on record from this point forward." "Already on it," Decker said. "I'm on. I've got 6 cameras rolling and Torres is maintaining GPS logs independently of the radio system." "Good." Cole paused. "We're going to hit something before the pass." "You think they'll try to block us?" "I think they've had 4.5 miles to set it up." Cole kept his eyes on the road ahead on the wall of white that the headlights pushed against without ever quite defeating. "Be ready." The next 3 miles passed in a silence that was full of its own tension. Not peaceful silence, but the held breath silence of people moving through a situation that has already made its intentions clear, but has not yet revealed its specific form. Grace sat in the passenger seat of the lead truck and studied the map with a small flashlight, her finger tracing a road that diverged from the main pass approximately 1 mile ahead. A service road unmarked on the county maps, but present on the original survey documents her father had found, that cut south along the base of the ridge and rejoined the main mountain approach from below. Slower, rougher, but not the road anyone watching Blackstone Pass would think to cover. She picked up as hippie Cole. "Go ahead." "My father marked a service road about a mile ahead. It branches right off the main road. It adds 40 minutes, but it bypasses the main pass entirely." A brief silence. "How confident are you in it?" "My father surveyed it himself. He walked it in October before the snow." She paused. "He marked it for exactly this situation. He wrote in his notebook that if anyone ever needed to reach the mountain without being seen from the pass, this was the way." Cole wrote in silence for 6 seconds. "He planned for this." "He planned for everything," Grace said. "He just didn't plan for what happened to him." Cole called back across the convoy. "All vehicles, we are diverting at the next junction. Follow the lead truck. No lights on the side road until we're past the tree line." There were no complaints, no questions. The convoy simply adjusted the way the people in it had learned to adjust, reading the situation, trusting the call moving forward. The service road was exactly where Grace said it would be, identified only by 2 survey stakes her father had placed in the ground in October, and which were still barely visible above the snow line. The lead truck turned right, and the convoy followed, engines dropping to a lower gear as the road deteriorated beneath them. The smooth county surface replaced by packed earth and old gravel that shifted under the weight of the vehicles. They moved without headlights for a quarter mile. Ahead, through the white static of the storm, the main Blackstone Pass checkpoint became visible, not clearly, but an outline through the trees enough to identify the cluster of county vehicles. The portable lights they had set up, in the shape of what Grace immediately recognized as a snowplow, positioned crossways across the road. Not a disabled vehicle, not storm response, a deliberate barricade. "Stop," Grace said sharply. The lead truck stopped. The convoy compressed behind it, vehicle by vehicle, until all of them were standing still in the dark service road. "How many vehicles?" Cole asked through the radio. "3 county units in the plow," said a biker near the back who had binoculars. "I count 4 men, maybe 5. There's a portable light rig. So neat." "They're not hiding." "They don't think they need to hide," Decker said. "They think we're on the main road walking straight into it." Grace was already out of the truck, standing in the snow, studying the checkpoint through the dark. Cole appeared beside her. "They're going to claim the road is closed," she said. "And when we try to go around, they'll escalate. That's how they've operated every time one official action that sounds illegitimate, and then when you push back, they have a reason to call it a confrontation." "We're not confronting them," Cole said. "Then how do we document them?" He turned to the convoy. "I want 3 cameras with clear sight lines to that checkpoint, timestamps on. I want everyone to see that there is a snowplow deliberately blocking a public county road at midnight with no avalanche debris anywhere near it." He looked at Grace. "The sheriff said there was an avalanche on the eastern face. Does that pass show any sign of avalanche debris?" Grace looked at the checkpoint, at the clean, undisturbed snow on the road surface beyond the plow. "None. So either the avalanche happened in a different location than the one they described, or there was no avalanche." Cole called out to the convoy. "I want that documented. The road surface, the snow condition, the absence of any debris, all of it." Members moved. Cameras were deployed with the disciplined efficiency of people who had done this before. Not in this specific situation, but in the general category of situations where what you could prove later mattered more than what you could do right now. That was when one of the mechanics at the rear of the convoy, a man named Briggs, no relation to the Harmon Briggs on their supply list, called on the radio with something that changed the temperature of the entire night. "Cole, you need to come to the rear vehicle right now." The tone in Briggs's voice was not alarm. It was something more controlled and more frightening than alarm. It was the voice of someone who has found a thing so specific and so serious that they do not want to describe it over a radio. Cole covered the distance to the rear truck in 90 seconds. Briggs was crouching beside the left bank of the snow on the road's shoulder, his flashlight directed into the packed, white surface. Cole crouched beside him. "I saw the shape when we stopped," Briggs said quietly. "The snow profile was wrong, too even, too deliberate." He moved the flashlight slightly. "Look." Cole looked. Beneath the surface, not deep 18 inches at most, placed there with precision, were the components of a directional charge. Not a blasting cap, not mining equipment, a functional assembly oriented toward the road. "Triggered how?" Cole asked. His voice was completely calm. "Remote, there's a receiver pack." Briggs moved the light. "It's designed to push the upper snowbank onto the road. You'd call it an avalanche. Anybody who wasn't looking for it would call it an avalanche." Cole stood up slowly. "A controlled avalanche, set in advance, remotely triggered, designed to seal the convoy inside the mountain zone after they passed through. They weren't trying to stop the convoy from going in. They were trying to trap it once it did." "Don't touch it," Cole said. "I want 3 cameras on it right now, and I want Renner to photograph it medically. I need clinical documentation of the construction, not just images." "Can you make it safe?" Briggs was already pulling tools from his jacket. "Give me 7 minutes." Cole walked back to the front of the convoy. His face was steady. His hands were steady. Inside his chest, something cold and specific had settled, a particular kind of anger that was less emotion than calibration. The recognition that the people they were dealing with had not simply drawn a line, but had prepared the ground on both sides of it. He found Grace standing at the lead truck with the map and updated her in 4 sentences. She listened. She didn't say anything for a moment. "Then my father found evidence of a controlled slide near the Hendricks property 3 years ago. The county attributed it to natural instability. The Hendricks family sold within a month." She looked at Cole. "This is how they've always operated. Make it look like the mountain. Let the mountain take the blame." "Not tonight," Cole said. He called the convoy together, not all 170 people, but the team leaders, 8 men and 2 women, who formed the operational core. They gathered around the front truck in the snow, and Cole laid it out in plain language: the jammer, the checkpoint ahead, the charge in the snowbank, the geometry of what someone had planned for them. When he finished, a biker named Carla Vasquez, who managed the convoy's communications equipment, said what everyone was already thinking. They're not just trying to stop us. They were going to trap us and then call it a natural event. We would have been stranded on a mountain with an active crime scene and no way to call for help. Yes, Cole said. So what do we do about the checkpoint? We don't go through it, Cole said. We go around it. Grace knows the terrain, but before we move, we transmit. He looked at Carla. You have the independent CB system. Can you reach beyond the jamming radius? If I boost the output and use the long-range antenna, maybe. The jammer has a range limit. If I can get a signal above the tree line, I can reach the next valley. Then that's what you do. You transmit our GPS location, the evidence of the charge, the checkpoint location, and the full situation report. You send it to every emergency channel, every reporter, contact we have, every attorney the club has ever worked with, and every neighboring county law enforcement office. You send it all, and you keep sending it. Carla was already moving. Cole turned to the rest of the team. Grace leads us on the secondary approach. We reach the mine, we find Daniel Holloway, we document everything inside, and we make sure that by the time anyone tries to stop us, there are enough people watching that stopping us means doing it in front of the entire state. Nobody argued. Nobody asked for reassurance. This was who these people were: not dramatic, not reckless, but implacable. They had stepped forward when asked, and they were not going to step back because the situation had turned out to be harder than a blizzard. The convoy reorganized. Briggs finished neutralizing the charge and documented it with 4 cameras and Renner's clinical photography. 2 trucks stayed behind at the charge site to guard the evidence and maintain transmission attempts. The remaining vehicles followed Grace onto a second service path she identified from memory, a track her father had walked twice in October, and described to her in enough detail that she could navigate it in a blizzard at 1 in the morning. She did it without hesitation. An hour into the secondary approach, they found the cabin. Grace saw it first, not because her eyes were better than anyone else's, but because she knew to look for it. Her father had mentioned it in a notebook entry as a landmark, a burned structure approximately half a mile below the mine access road, destroyed in a fire 3 years earlier that the county had listed as electrical. She asked Cole to stop the convoy. She got out and walked to the cabin alone. Cole followed her 2 steps behind, close enough to intervene, but far enough back to understand that this was something she needed to approach on her own terms. The structure was mostly collapsed. What remained of the walls was charred and snow-filled. But Grace moved through what had been the front room with a certainty that said she was not exploring, she was remembering instructions. Her father had been here. He had left something here. She found it beneath the collapsed section of the interior wall, a waterproof case, the kind used for survey equipment, wrapped in 2 layers of canvas and placed in a gap in the foundation stones. She pulled it free and held it in both hands. He told me, she said half to herself, he told me if the cabin was standing, look under the east foundation wall. He said the cabin would probably be gone by the time I needed this. A sound came out of her that was not quite a laugh and not quite a song, and was honest in the way that sounds are when they don't have time to be anything else. He was right. Cole crouched beside her as she opened the case. Inside was a notebook, not the map she carried, but a separate record. Spiral-bound waterproof pages, the handwriting small and precise in the way of someone who had trained themselves to record information accurately rather than quickly. Beside the notebook was a small digital voice recorder. Grace pressed play. Daniel Holloway's voice came through the speaker, steady, professional, with the particular quality of a man recording a document rather than a message, maintaining his composure, because composure was the job. This is Daniel Holloway, County Surveyor, recording October 14th. I am documenting a secondary evidence cache at the Birch Creek structure for retrieval in the event I am unable to personally deliver the primary evidence. Everything in this case, the notebook, the coordinate records, and the audio file on this recorder, represents 8 months of field documentation of boundary alterations in the Silver Crown Mountain Zone. If you are hearing this and I am not with you, please do not come looking for me alone. Come with people you trust. Come with people who will not disappear quietly. He paused on the recording and then, Grace, if this is you, I love you. I did what needed doing. Make sure it matters. Grace pressed, stop. She held the recorder in both hands and breathed. Cole did not say anything because there was nothing useful to say. He just stayed where he was, present and steady, and let her have the 30 seconds she needed to move from that moment to the next one. When she looked up, her eyes were wet, but her voice was completely controlled. There's more in the notebook. He identified the location of the main evidence cache. He found a structure on the mountain, an old Cold War bunker used by the Federal Survey Team in the 50s. He said Blackridge had been using it for storage. He found it 3 weeks before he disappeared. She opened the notebook to a page her father had marked with a strip of tape. He left coordinates. Cole looked at the coordinates, showed them to Grace. Is this where you thought we were going? Close, but not exactly. She studied the page. He found a second entrance, one that doesn't appear on any of the county records. Of course it doesn't, Decker said from the doorway of the cabin. He had followed them in and stood reading over Cole's shoulder. He said it flatly without surprise, with the particular exhaustion of someone who has stopped expecting the situation to be anything other than exactly this complicated. Cole stood. Then we adjust the route. They were moving again within 4 minutes. The convoy had been stationary for 11 minutes total, long enough for Grace to recover her father's second cache, and not long enough for the checkpoint team to identify their position on the secondary road. But the checkpoint team was not the only problem. Torres, driving the lead truck, called in at the 40-minute mark of the secondary approach. His voice had the careful flatness of someone reporting a fact they don't want to be a fact. Cole, we've got lights behind us. Maybe a mile back. 3 sets. Moving our speed. Cole turned and looked through the rear window of the vehicle he was riding in. 3 sets of headlights in the dark, maintaining distance, not accelerating, not falling behind. Following. Not county vehicles, Cole asked. No county markings I can see. Private plates, one of them is an SUV. Blackridge Security, or something operating under the same instruction. Do they know where we're going? Decker asked. They're following, Cole said. They'll know when we get there. So they'll know where the bunker is. They already know where the bunker is, Grace said quietly from the back seat. They've been using it. She looked at Cole. They're not following us to find it. They're following us to be there when we arrive. The distinction settled over the truck like the temperature dropping. They were not being chased away from the evidence. They were being herded toward a controlled situation, a place where 170 bikers and 1 young woman would arrive to find private security already positioned where any confrontation would happen on ground that Blackridge had chosen and prepared. Then we don't give them the confrontation they want, Cole said. He picked up the radio. Carla, status on the transmission. Carla's voice came back slightly broken by the terrain but audible. I'm getting signal above the tree line on 2 channels. I've sent the initial report. I have confirmation from a reporter at the Greyhaven Courier and a call back from a federal land office contact. They're receiving. Keep transmitting. Everything continuously. I want a live log going out of everything we see from this point forward. Understood. Cole lowered the radio and then looked at Grace. When we get to the bunker, you and your father's documents are the story. Everything else, the checkpoint, the charge, the vehicles behind us, that's the frame. But the documents are the story. We need to reach them, and we need to secure them before anyone can claim they don't exist. And my father, Grace said, not loud, but with a weight that cut through everything else. He might still be alive. His notebooks say the bunker has emergency supplies. If he made it there, then we find him, Cole said. He said it the way he had learned to say things that were promises in the field, not with the emotion of a promise, but with the flatness of a plan. That's why we came. The lights behind them maintained their distance for the next mile. Then, without warning, the center vehicle accelerated. Torres called it in. Middle vehicle is moving up, coming fast. Speed, Cole said. Way too fast for this road. Let them pass, Cole said immediately. Pull right. Let them go. Torres pulled the lead truck to the right. The convoy shifted with it. The accelerating vehicle roared past them on the narrow service road, an SUV, no plates visible in the dark, not slowing, pushing hard up the mountain road, going ahead of them, going to the bunker. They sent someone ahead, Decker said. To get there first, Cole confirmed. He thought for exactly 3 seconds. Carla, I need you to transmit a specific coordinate right now, the location we are approaching. Send it marked as a potential evidence destruction site. Send it to the federal land contact and to every news channel that's received our prior transmission. A pause, then Carla. If I send that, they'll know exactly where we're going. Everyone will know exactly where we're going, Cole said. That's the point. The only thing protecting that evidence right now is visibility. We need to be the most visible people on this mountain. He looked at the convoy around him, at the cameras still running, at Grace Holloway holding her father's notebook and the recorder with his voice on it, sitting in a truck on a mountain road in a blizzard, composed and focused and frightened and moving forward anyway. We are not the most dangerous thing on this mountain tonight, Cole said. The truth is, and they know it, that's why they're running ahead of us. He picked up the radio. All convoy vehicles, we are accelerating to safe maximum speed on this road. We need to reach Silver Crown Mine access before whoever is ahead of us has time to do what they went ahead to do. Move. The convoy moved. Grace gripped the door handle as the truck picked up speed, the road rough beneath them, the dark pressing in from every side. Her father's voice was still in her ear. I did what needed doing, make sure it matters, and she held onto it the way she had held onto the map, the way she had held onto Cole's vest in the clubhouse doorway, like it was the only thing keeping her on her feet. Ahead, somewhere up the mountain through the snow and the dark, her father had hidden the truth in a place powerful men thought they controlled. And now 170 bikers were driving toward it through a blizzard while the people trying to bury it raced to get there first. The road curved upward. The lights ahead disappeared into the dark. And Grace Holloway looked at the mountain and thought about what her father had written in that notebook, the last line she had read before closing it in the ruined cabin. The truth survives when more than one person carries it. She looked at the convoy around her, at all the people who had stepped forward without being asked twice. More than one person. The mountain waited. The convoy climbed. And somewhere in the dark ahead, the night was about to become something that no one involved would ever be able to call a natural event again. The SUV that had raced ahead of them was parked at an angle outside the mine access road. When the convoy arrived, its engines still running, its doors open, nobody inside. Whoever had been in it was already on foot, ready moving toward the mine entrance, already ahead of them in the dark. Cole was out of his vehicle before Torres had fully stopped. 2 teams, he said, already moving. Decker, take 8 people and secure that vehicle. I want to know who it's registered to, and I want cameras on everything. Briggs, you're with me. Grace, stay with. I'm coming with you, Grace said. She was already beside him. Her father's notebook in her jacket, the map folded in her left hand. Her voice left no room for negotiation. Cole looked at her for exactly 1 second. Then stay on my left and do exactly what I say when I say it. Yes. They moved. The mine access road was steep and uneven beneath the snow, the kind of terrain that demanded attention from your feet even when every other part of you was focused somewhere else entirely. Cole moved fast and Grace kept pace, and behind them came 6 of the club's most experienced men, not the youngest or the biggest, but the ones who had been on mountain operations before, who understood that speed and silence mattered more than display. Briggs came up alongside Cole and spoke quietly. Footprints ahead. 2 sets, maybe 3 minutes ahead of us. Armed and I couldn't tell from the vehicle, but the way they left the doors open, they weren't planning to carry anything back. They went in to destroy something. Grace heard that and said nothing. She just walked faster. The mine entrance appeared as her father had described it, not a traditional shaft opening, but a timber-framed access point built into the mountain face old enough to predate Black Ridge, old enough that its original purpose had nothing to do with mining. The Cold War Federal Survey bunker her father had documented, used for 40 years as a storage facility, then officially decommissioned and buried in county records as a collapsed structure. Officially non-existent. The door was steel set into the timber frame, locked with a padlock that had been cut. Not by the people ahead of them. By Daniel Holloway 18 days ago, when he came here with a bolt cutter and the specific intent of a man who has realized that the safest place to hide the truth is inside the crime itself. Grace reached into her jacket and produced a small silver key on a cord around her neck. My father gave me this 3 weeks ago, she said, the day he came home looking like he already knew what was coming. She unlocked the door. Cole pushed it open and went in first. Briggs right behind him. Grace third. The air inside was cold and close, the particular cold of underground spaces that haven't had fresh air in weeks. Their flashlights cut through the dark, and the first thing Cole registered was the size of the space larger than a mine storage room, purpose-built as a working facility with concrete walls and steel shelving units along three sides. The second thing he registered was what was on the shelving units. Files, boxes of them, dozens of boxes, but these were not Daniel Holloway's files. These were Blackridge's files, the materials the company had moved into the bunker at some point in the past several years. The records that connected the falsified surveys to the money to the county officials to the legal mechanisms that had taken 14 families off their land. The third thing he registered were the two men standing at the far end of the room. They were in the process of pulling boxes from the shelves. One of them had a large canvas bag. The other was holding a device that Cole recognized immediately, an incendiary igniter, compact military grade, the kind that produces a fire fast enough and hot enough to turn paper records to ash in under 4 minutes. "Stop," Cole said. His voice in the closed space was not loud. It didn't need to be. Both men turned. They were private security. The posture, the equipment, the specific blankness of men being paid to solve a problem rather than invested in its outcome. One of them was older, with the bearing of someone who had done this work for a long time. The other was younger and visibly calculating the odds. "This is a restricted access area," the older one said. "You need to leave." "Put the device down," Cole said. "We have authorization." "You have a cut padlock and an incendiary device," Cole said. "You have about 30 seconds before 6 body cameras document both of those things in enough detail that authorization becomes irrelevant." The younger man's eyes moved to the cameras. He was counting them, finding them on jackets, on helmet mounts, on handheld rigs. 6 streams going live to Carla's transmission system, broadcasting to everyone who had been receiving their signal for the past 2 hours. The older man hadn't moved the device. "This structure is on Blackridge property, and these records are company property. We are authorized to—" "The structure is on disputed land," Grace said. She stepped forward, and her voice was clear and hard and carried something that silence respects. "The boundaries that made this Blackridge property were falsified by county officials working with your company. My father documented every step of that process. Those records you're trying to burn are evidence of 14 counts of fraudulent property acquisition, organized corruption of county survey records, and deliberate destruction of family land going back 11 years. She stopped. "Let that sit. Then, and my father is somewhere in this structure. If anything has happened to him, every charge I just listed becomes the least of your problems." The younger man set down the canvas bag. The older one held the igniter for 3 more seconds. Then he placed it on the shelf beside him with the careful deliberateness of a man who has just done the math and found the answer unsatisfying. Cole exhaled slowly. He turned to Briggs. "Secure both of them and keep the cameras on." He turned to Grace. "Where would your father have gone?" She already had the notebook open. She moved along the right wall of the bunker, counting doors, passing 2 steel panels that opened to the storage alcoves until she reached the third. It was different from the others, heavier, sealed with a secondary lock, with a ventilation pipe running up through the ceiling. A maintenance chamber, original federal construction, designed as a sealed survival space for the survey team if the main facility was compromised. Grace put her hand flat against the door. "Dad," she said, "just that. Just the words spoken against the steel, not loud." Silence. Then muffled, weakened, but unmistakable, a sound from the other side. A voice. Grace's hand pressed harder against the door. Cole was beside her and 2 steps examining the lock. It was a secondary padlock, newer than the door added recently. Added from the outside. Someone had locked Daniel Holloway in from the outside. "Briggs," Cole said. Briggs was already there with bolt cutters. 2 cuts. The padlock fell. Cole pulled the door open and stepped back so Grace could go first. The air that came out of the maintenance chamber was stale and cold, and carried the specific smell of a space where someone has been surviving, rather than living generator fuel, canned food, the staleness of recycled air. Grace went through the door, and Cole heard a sound from inside that he would spend a long time remembering, the sound of a father and daughter finding each other on the other side of 18 days that should have ended differently. He did not go in immediately. He stood at the door and let 60 seconds pass because 60 seconds was not too much to give to that moment. When he stepped inside, Grace was kneeling beside her father. Daniel Holloway was sitting against the interior wall, a generator at his left that had run out of fuel at some point in the past 48 hours, a dozen empty cans of emergency food stacked neatly to his right. He was 53 years old and looked 10 years older than that right now. Pale drawn, his weight visibly reduced, his eyes sunken. But those eyes were sharp, completely, entirely sharp. The mind behind them had not deteriorated at all. He looked at Cole and said in a voice roughened by cold and disuse, "You must be Mercer." "I am," Cole said. "My daughter found you." "She found us, all 170 of us." Daniel Holloway looked at Grace, and the expression on his face in that moment was something that words do not improve by attempting to describe. He reached up and took her hand and held it. Then he looked back at Cole. "The file's in the main room." "We have them," Cole said. "Two men were trying to destroy them. We stopped the venom." "How many copies did they get?" "None. We arrived in time." Daniel closed his eyes for 3 seconds. When he opened them, something in his posture shifted, a weight releasing that had been held in place for 18 days by nothing but willpower and stumpy determination. "There's more," he said. "The main files are the physical records. But I hit a second set. Digital. Voice recordings coordinate data, the altered survey files with their originals for comparison. I uploaded them to a secure server before I came up here." He looked at Grace. "The login is in the notebook." "I have the notebook," Grace said. "Then you have everything." He looked at Cole again. "There's also a recorded conversation. Me and Commissioner Voss 2 months before I disappeared. He called me to his office and offered to make my concerns disappear in exchange for my silence. I recorded the whole meeting." He paused and something came into his eyes that was not quite a smile. "Bad habit of a careful man. I record everything." Cole crouched to his level. "We need to move you. Can you walk?" "If I have to." Daniel started to rise and Grace and Cole both moved to help him, and he accepted the help with the particular lack of resistance of a man who has spent 18 days carefully conserving every resource and knows that now is not the time for pride. They were halfway to the main room when Decker's voice came through Cole's radio with a new quality, not alarm as Vox, but the compressed urgency of someone who has identified a situation that cannot wait for the current conversation to finish. "Cole, we have a problem outside." "How big?" "Sheriff Rourke, Commissioner Voss, 3 county units and a Black Ridge security vehicle, and a bulldozer." Cole stopped walking. "They have a demolition order," Decker continued. "Voss is claiming the structure is unstable and posing an immediate safety hazard to public land. The order authorizes immediate demolition." Grace looked at Cole. "They can't." "They're going to try," Cole said. He looked at Daniel, then back at Grace. "The evidence, all of it. The physical files, the digital access, the recorder with Voss's conversation. Can you carry it?" "Yes," Grace said immediately. "Then you carry it and you stay inside until I tell you it's safe to come out." He looked at Daniel. "Both of you." Daniel shook his head. "I've been hiding in here for 18 days. I'm not hiding anymore." Cole looked at the man, weakened, underfed, barely steady on his feet, and completely immovable in his intention, and made the decision that the situation was going to require Daniel Holloway to be the kind of man he already obviously was. "Then come out with me," Cole said. "But let me do the talking first." Outside, the contrast between what they'd left and what they returned to was immediate and physical. The blizzard was still running full force, the snow driving horizontal, but within that white chaos there were now additional lights, the hard lights of county vehicles, the amber strobes of the bulldozer, the portable floodlight that Voss's team had set up to illuminate the mine entrance. Sheriff Wade Rourke stood at the front of the county formation. Commissioner Everett Voss stood beside him. Voss was a man in his early 60s who had the look of someone who had spent decades making sure the rooms he stood in understood who had the authority. He wore it like a coat, the particular confidence of a man who has never been in a room where his power didn't ultimately prevail. He was looking at 170 bikers arranged in a loose formation across the mine entrance, every one of them recording, and his confidence was adjusting itself to the new information in real time. Cole walked out and crossed the space between them until he was close enough to speak without raising his voice above the wind. "Commissioner," he said, "you want to tell me what that demolition order is based on?" Voss held up a document. Structural assessment filed by the county engineer. This facility is in immediate danger of collapse and poses a hazard to public safety. We are authorized under emergency ordinance to... The county engineer has never been inside this structure, Grace said. She had come out behind Cole. She was standing to his left, as he had asked, holding a waterproof case containing the physical records, her father's notebook visible in her jacket pocket, the recorder in her hand. Voss's eyes moved to her, then behind her, to Daniel. Something crossed Voss's face when he saw Daniel Holloway standing in the entrance of the bunker. Cole watched it happen, a fast, controlled rearrangement, the expression of a man recalculating his position while maintaining his posture. "Mr. Holloway," Voss said, "I'm glad you're safe. We've been searching." "You locked me in," Daniel said. His voice was rough and quiet, and it carried in the blizzard the way voices carry when they have exactly one thing to say and mean it completely. "You had your security team lock me in that maintenance chamber 18 days ago. I had documented your agreement with Blackridge. I had recordings of our conversation in your office. And instead of having me arrested or dealing with it through any legitimate process, you locked me in a hole in the mountain and waited to see if I'd die or give up." Voss said nothing. "He didn't die," Cole said. "He didn't give up, and we have everything he documented." Rourke stepped forward. "Mercer, this is an official county emergency action. I am ordering you and your people to clear this area." "Sheriff, you told me at midnight that Blackstone Pass was closed due to an avalanche," Cole said. He kept his voice completely level. There was no avalanche. There was a deliberate explosive charge set in the snowbank on the access road, positioned to trigger a controlled slide and trap this convoy on the mountain. "We have it on camera, and we have it in the custody of a member of my team who documented it before disarming it." Rourke went still. "We also have your checkpoint on camera, the snowplow you positioned as a barricade, the timing of it, the clean road surface behind it that showed no avalanche debris." Cole paused. "And we've been transmitting all of it for the past 90 minutes. To reporters, to federal land investigators, to a contact at the state attorney general's office. Everything we found on this mountain tonight is already documented and in more than one place." Voss turned to Rourke, a fast private look that carried more information than anything either of them had said publicly. Rourke turned back to Cole. "I need to what?" Cole said quietly. "Because I want to be very clear about what happens next. If you order that bulldozer forward, you are ordering the demolition of a federal survey facility in front of 170 witnesses and approximately 6 live camera streams. You are doing it while Commissioner Voss stands 20 feet from the man he imprisoned illegally for 18 days. And you are doing it while a federal contact is actively monitoring our GPS position and our transmission." He stopped. "Or you can choose not to do that." The bulldozer sat idle. Nobody moved it. Voss straightened his coat. He was a man who had lived his entire professional life inside a structure of authority and had never once found himself outside it, and being outside it now had a specific visible effect, not collapse, not panic, but a kind of careful, controlled stillness that was its own form of exposure. "I have a legal demolition order," Voss said. His voice was steady, but it was working to be steady. "Then let the courts look at it," Cole said. "All of this. The order, the timing, the fact that you filed it on the same night your security team drove up this mountain ahead of a civilian convoy. Let all of it go on the record." Voss looked at him. A long look, the kind that is sizing up not just the immediate obstacle, but the full dimension of a situation that has stopped being containable. Grace stepped forward. She didn't look at Voss. She turned away from him, entirely walked back to the mine entrance and disappeared inside. Cole watched her go. He kept his body positioned between the convoy and the county vehicles, and he waited. She was inside for 4 minutes. When she came back out, she was carrying the small digital recorder in her right hand. She held it up so that the portable floodlight caught it clearly. "This recorder contains a 40-minute conversation between my father and Commissioner Voss," she said. She said it loud enough that everyone present could hear her. The bikers, the county deputies, the Blackridge security personnel, Rourke Voss himself. It was recorded in the commissioner's office on November 7th. In this conversation, Commissioner Voss offers my father a financial payment in exchange for suppressing evidence of the boundary alterations. My father declines. Commissioner Voss then informs my father that his survey license could be reviewed and that his continued cooperation with the county would be in his best professional interests. She lowered the recorder. "This conversation has already been transmitted," she said, "along with everything else." The portable floodlight hummed. The bulldozer sat still. The wind moved through the space between the two groups of people like something that had been waiting for the right moment to pass through. And then from somewhere below the mountain, carried up through the blizzard, distant but definite and growing, came the sound of sirens. Not county sirens, not Rourke's units, which were all already on the mountain. Different sirens, multiple vehicles. State plates, Cole would learn later. Federal jurisdiction. Warrants obtained through transmitted evidence, the result of 90 minutes of Carla pushing signal through the tree line and across the valley while the convoy climbed. Rourke heard them too. His hand moved toward his radio and stopped. He looked at Voss. Voss was looking at the recorder in Grace Holloway's hand. Cole watched it happen the moment when a structure that has been built on concealment encounters the specific condition it was never designed to survive: complete visibility. Voss had spent 11 years building something that worked precisely because no one could see all of it at once. 14 separate fraudulent land transactions, each one individually defensible, each one requiring local authority to cover its edges. A system of which he was the center, the person holding all the threads. But Grace had the recorder, and Carla had been transmitting for 90 minutes. And 170 people had stood on this mountain and refused to be moved. Voss looked at Rourke one more time. Then he took a step back from the floodlight. Just one step. But everyone saw it. Cole turned to his people. "Hold the line. Nobody moves. Keep everything running." The sirens got louder. And Decker Walsh, standing at Cole's right shoulder, made the sound he made when something turned a short exhale through his nose. Not a laugh, but adjacent to one, the sound of a man releasing tension he had been carrying since midnight. "State boys are fast when they get a federal land request," he said quietly. "Grace got them the coordinates 90 minutes ago," Cole said. "Smart girl." "Smart man raised her," Cole said. He glanced back at the mine entrance where Daniel Holloway had come to stand still, pale, still unsteady, but standing. Just standing in the blizzard outside the mountain that had tried to keep him looking at the sirens coming through the dark below. Cole walked back to him. Daniel was looking at Grace. She was still holding the recorder. Her arm was at her side now. The wind was doing what it wanted with her hair, and she wasn't trying to manage it. She was just standing there looking at the approaching lights, this 20-year-old woman who had walked 8 miles through a blizzard with a map against her chest and knocked on a biker clubhouse door and said 3 words that had changed the shape of this entire night. "She walked 8 miles to find help for you," Cole said to Daniel. Daniel Holloway looked at his daughter for a longer moment. "She walked 8 miles, he said softly. "I taught her to survey land, to read coordinates, to document everything, and trust nothing that isn't in writing." He stopped. "I don't know where she got the part that walked 8 miles. Cole thought about that. "Maybe that part was already there," he said. "Maybe you just gave it somewhere to walk to." The first state vehicle crested the rise below the mine access road, and its lights swept the area, catching the bulldozer, the county units, the 170 bikers, the 2 private security men who Briggs had kept secured beside the mine entrance. Rourke and Voss standing in the light with the specific look of men who have run out of room. The night was not over. There were hours of statements ahead of jurisdictions being established, of warrants being served, and documents being secured, and the procedural machinery of accountability being fed in all the material that Cole's convoy and Grace's 18 days and Daniel's 8 months had assembled into something that could no longer be dismissed, buried, or burned. But the moment when it was still possible for the other side to win had passed. Cole knew that moment. He had learned to recognize it in places far from Montana, in situations that resolved in ways both good and terrible. There was always a specific instant when the balance tipped, not dramatically, not announced but definite. You felt it more than saw it. He had felt it when Grace Holloway pressed play on her father's recorder and held it up in the floodlight. The demolition order was never executed. The bulldozer never moved. Voss took his step back and did not step forward again, and that single step backward in the snow in front of 170 witnesses and 6 live cameras was the moment Blackridge Mining's 11-year operation on Silver Crown Mountain ended. Not with a confrontation, not with violence. With a recorder, a transmission, and a line of people who had decided that the mountain's secret was worth standing in a blizzard for as long as it took. Renner arrived at Daniel's side with the medical bag and began assessing him with quick, professional hands. Daniel submitted to the examination with the resignation of a man who knows better than to argue with a paramedic. Grace came to stand beside Cole. She did not say anything for a moment. She looked at the state vehicles below, at the officials moving up the road, at the two private security men, at Voss, at the bulldozer that had not moved. It worked, she said, not triumphantly, almost quietly, the way you say something when you allowed yourself to imagine it working, but couldn't quite believe it until you were on the other side of it. You made it work, Cole said. We made it work. She looked at him. All of us. Cole nodded. He was quiet for a moment. Then Grace, there's something I need to tell you about my father's connection to this, about the land sale that started all of this. She met his eyes. I know. I'm going to tell them everything. The state investigators, the federal land office, all of it, my father's sale, the shell company, it fed into how it became the legal foundation for what Voss built. It will be public. I know, she said again. It might reflect on the club, on people here who didn't have anything to do with it. Cole. She said his name the way her father might have, with a directness that came from having spent her whole life learning to trust careful, honest men. You drove 170 people up a mountain in a blizzard to find my father. I think your people can handle a public record. Cole almost smiled, not quite, but close. Yeah, he said, I think so too. Below them, the state investigators were moving up the road. Above them, Silver Crown Mountain held the cold and the dark in the particular silence of a place that has given up something it was never supposed to be keeping. The truth was out, and it was in more than one place now, exactly as Daniel Holloway had always intended. Part bond. Lưu ý viết 5.000 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện pha hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng. Hoặc tiêu đề phụ phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ Hoa Kỳ giống văn giàu cảm xúc chân thực và gần gũi. Không mô tả cảnh, tập trung vào hành động, cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật. Viết phần 2 đạt điểm 10 trên 10 và bổ sung tiết tấu câu chuyện nhanh, sửa lời ai kể theo ngôi thứ 3 tăng độ kịch tính. Không viết lan man, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mốc tin nhắn không nhảy sang mức document mới. 2 đến 3 phút cần có mini climax và đạt 10 đến 15. Mini climax mỗi phần cứ 10 đến 12 phút. Có một twist lớn sâu sắc đan xen mini cliffhanger mạnh hơn. Tăng tính tự nhiên cho phản ứng của các nhân vật, thêm nhịp điệu, kịch tính thực tế và gần gũi. Mỗi 8 đến 10 phút cần có móc giữ chân khán giả. Lưu ý không mô tả cảnh và chỉ cần viết nội dung và viết đúng lệnh nhé. Show more. The first state investigator to reach the mine entrance was a woman named Special Agent Dana Forsyth, and she moved through the blizzard with the particular efficiency of someone who has been briefed on a situation and has already formed a working theory that she is testing against the reality in front of her. She was 41, had the kind of face that processed information faster than it revealed reactions, and she went directly to Cole without being directed to him because he was the person the situation organized itself around the same way it always had. You're Mercer, she said. I am. We received your transmission at 1:47 this morning. Full GPS coordinates, photographic evidence of an explosive device on the access road, a situation report, and approximately 40 minutes of audio from a digital recorder. She looked at the mine entrance, at the bunker door, at the 2 private security men sitting in the snow with Briggs's people around them, at Voss, at Rourke. How long has your convoy been on this mountain? We left the clubhouse at approximately 12:15, Cole said. We've been recording continuously since we hit the county road. I'm going to need all of that footage. You'll have it. Every camera, every timestamp, every file Carla transmitted tonight. He paused. I also need to tell you something personal before you start taking statements. My father sold property on Silver Crown 12 years ago. That property became the legal foundation that Voss used to begin the boundary fraud. I didn't know about Voss's involvement when I came up here tonight, but I know about it now, and I'm telling you first so there's no question later about what I knew and when. Forsyth looked at him for a measured moment. You're volunteering that. I'm volunteering everything, Cole said. That's the only way this works. She studied him for another 2 seconds, the kind of appraisal that doesn't waste time on social protocol. Then she nodded once. I appreciate that, Mr. Mercer. We'll take your statement in full. She turned toward her team and moved into operational mode, directing people to specific positions with the economy of someone who has coordinated complex evidence scenes before and does not need to explain herself twice. Cole turned back to the mine entrance. Inside, Renner had Daniel Holloway sitting with a thermal blanket around his shoulders, an IV line in his arm, delivering fluids, his vital signs being checked with quiet professional thoroughness. Daniel was cooperating, but his eyes kept moving to Grace, tracking her the way parents track children when they've been separated too long and haven't yet reset to the ordinary rhythm of proximity. Grace was sitting beside him on an equipment crate, close enough that their arms touched. She wasn't crying anymore. She had done the crying in the first 60 seconds and then shifted into the mode her father recognized in her, the careful, organized, forward-facing mode that had kept her moving for 18 days when any other posture would have been easier. "Your color's better," she told him. "Renner keeps saying that," Daniel said. "I think it's a thing paramedics say." "It's not," Renner said without looking up from the blood pressure cuff. "Your systolic is actually improving. You're dehydrated and malnourished, but there's no cardiac involvement, and your temperature is climbing. You're going to be uncomfortable for a few days and fine after that." Daniel looked at Grace. He has a very literal relationship with reassurance. "I like it," Grace said. "So do I." Daniel reached over and put his hand on top of hers. "Tell me what happened, all of it, from when you got the map." So she told him. Sitting in the cold interior of the bunker that had tried to be his grave with Renner, working quietly beside them, and the sounds of the operation outside filtering through the open door, Grace Holloway told her father everything. The men who came to her apartment the 8 miles through the blizzard, Cole's clubhouse, and the 170 men who stepped forward the checkpoint, and the explosive charge, and the service road, and the burned cabin where she found his second cache. The SUV that raced ahead of them, the 2 security men they caught in the act. Daniel listened without interrupting. His expression moved through things, pride, pain, something that looked briefly like guilt before it became something steadier. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You walked 8 miles, he said. "You told me to come here if I couldn't trust the badge. I told you that as a precaution. I didn't think," he stopped, started over. "I underestimated how fast they'd move." "You didn't underestimate anything," Grace said. "You prepared for everything. The second cache, the coordinates, the notebook, the recorder, you prepared for exactly what happened. The only thing you didn't plan for was 18 days. 18 days was not ideal," Daniel said dryly. "No," Grace agreed. "It was not." Outside, the situation was moving fast. Forsyth's team was establishing an evidence perimeter around the bunker, photographing the physical files, processing the 2 private security men, and taking initial statements from bikers who had been closest to the key events of the night. A second state vehicle had arrived carrying a forensic team, and a third was on its way up the road with additional investigators. Sheriff Rourke had been separated from Commissioner Voss and placed in the custody of 2 state officers who were polite about it in the specific way that makes it clear politeness is a professional choice, not an indication of the underlying situation. Voss was standing with his own attorney, a man who had been reached by phone and was now present via a call on Voss's cell, advising him in a low, rapid voice that carried the urgency of someone who has just understood the full dimension of what their client has done. Cole watched all of this from the mine entrance. Decker materialized beside him. "Voss's attorney is on the phone," Decker said. "I know. He's going to try to reframe this as a land dispute, a civil matter. He's going to say the criminal accusations are exaggerated and that any procedural irregularities." "He can try," Cole said. "We have 40 minutes of Voss discussing bribes in his own voice. That's not a procedural irregularity." Decker was quiet for a moment. "There's something else." He said it with the particular weight of someone who has been holding a piece of information and has been deciding when to deliver it. "While you were inside, Torres was running the plate on the SUV that came up ahead of us. And registered to a shell company, Lakeview Property Services, LLC. Decker paused. "Which is the same shell company that your father sold his land to 12 years ago." Cole turned to look at him. "It's the same entity," Decker said. "The company that bought your father's land, the company that operates the SUV, the company that Blackridge used as the legal buffer between their public operations and the fraudulent acquisitions. They're all the same LLC, different registered addresses over the years, but the same tax identification number. Cole stood with that for a moment. 12 years ago, his father had sold land to a company that turned out to be the foundation of an 11-year criminal operation. And tonight, a vehicle owned by that same company had raced up a mountain ahead of the convoy to destroy the evidence before they could reach it. Voss built the whole thing on top of one legitimate sale, Cole said, one real transaction, and he used my father's name to make the first link in the chain look clean. Which means your father's sale didn't just provide a legal foothold, Decker said. It provided cover, the legitimacy that made every subsequent fraudulent transfer harder to question. He didn't know, Cole said. It came out flat, not defensive, a statement of fact that needed to be stated. I know he didn't know, Decker said, but it's going to be in the record. It should be in the record, Cole said. All of it should be in the record. He looked at Forsyth, who was 40 feet away, directing her team with a radio in one hand and a tablet in the other. I'm going to walk her through the Shell Company connection right now, before her team finds it on their own and wonders why I didn't tell them. Decker looked at him for a moment. You know that's going to complicate things for the club. I know. Some people are going to connect your father's name to this, and from there, they're going to try to connect it to you, and from there, Decker. Cole stopped him. I came up this mountain to find the truth. I can't find it and then decide which parts I get to keep private. He started toward Forsyth. That's exactly the thing we drove through a blizzard to stop someone else from doing. He briefed Forsyth on the Shell Company connection in full. She listened, asked precise clarifying questions, and added 3 pages of notes to her tablet. She did not treat Cole differently after hearing it. She treated him the way she had before, as the most organized and forthcoming witness present at a complex crime scene, which was exactly what he was. When Cole returned to the mine entrance, Grace was standing outside with her father. Daniel had been helped to his feet and was standing with Renner's arm for support, taking his first steps outside the bunker in 18 days. He breathed the blizzard air with the specific appreciation of a man who has been underground long enough to understand that cold and wet and wind are conditions of the living world. The state investigators need your statement, Cole told him. Are you ready for that? I've been ready for that for 8 months, Daniel said. The last 18 days just made me more thorough. He walked with Renner toward Forsyth's position, and Grace started to follow. Cole touched her arm lightly. Before you go, there's something in the Shell Company connection that you need to know. He told her about Lakeview Property Services, the tax identification number, the SUV. He watched her face as she processed it, not with shock, because she had been living inside this story long enough that new complexity registered as information rather than surprise, but with something that looked like understanding, the kind that reorganizes what you already knew into a shape that finally makes the whole picture visible. Voss needed a clean first transaction, she said, something that looked like ordinary commerce. So when anyone audited the beginning of the land acquisition chain, it started with a normal sale by a private individual. My father, Cole said. He targeted your father specifically, Grace said. He didn't just happen to buy that land. He chose it because your father was a private individual with no connection to the county, no reason to suspect fraud, and she stopped. Say it, Cole said. And because your name gave him something else. You were already running the bikers. You were already known. If anyone ever traced the Shell Company back to its origin, finding a Mercer in the deed would make anyone think twice about investigating further. Because going after the first link in the chain meant going near the Hell's Angles. Cole went very still. The specific coldness that came over him in that moment was not anger exactly. It was something colder and more precise, the recognition that Voss had not just accidentally used his father's transaction. He had chosen it deliberately. Robert Mercer's name in that deed was not incidental. It was strategic. He used my father as a shield, Cole said, and then he spent years in knowing that if the investigation ever got close to him, there was a biker's name on the first document. Grace looked at him directly. I thought you deserved to know that before your statement. Cole was quiet for 10 seconds. Long enough that Decker, watching from 8 feet away, did not say anything because he recognized the silence. Then Cole said, it didn't work. No, Grace said, it didn't. I'm going to make sure the investigators understand the full picture. Not just that my father sold the land, but why Voss chose him specifically. He paused. I'm going to make Voss explain that choice on the record. He walked toward where Voss was standing with his attorney. Voss saw him coming. Something moved through his expression, a recalculation, the fast internal processing of a man who has been reading situations and adjusting his position for decades. "Mercer," he said, "I think it would be better if we let the investigators—" "Why did you choose my father?" Cole asked. He asked it quietly, without aggression, the way you ask a question when you have already assembled enough of the answer that you just need the person to finish the sentence. Voss looked at his attorney's face on the phone screen. The attorney said something Cole couldn't hear. Voss looked back at Cole. "I'm not going to have this conversation without—" "You used his name because it was mine," Cole said. "You put a Mercer in the foundation of a fraud, and you counted on people thinking twice before they followed that thread. You used my family's reputation as a wall." He paused. "I just want you to know that I know, and that I'm going to make sure the investigators know." "And that the wall didn't hold." Voss said nothing. Cole walked away from him without waiting for a response. By 3 in the morning, the evidence processing operation was fully underway. The physical files from the bunker were being cataloged and secured by Forsyth's forensic team. Daniel's digital server was accessed remotely with the login from his notebook, and investigators were receiving documents that spanned 8 months of meticulous professional survey work. Coordinate records, boundary comparison maps, payment ledgers, and the 40-minute recorded conversation between Daniel and Voss that had already been transmitted to the Attorney General's office and was being listened to by people who had the authority to do something specific about it. The 2 private security men had given statements. They were employees of a contractor used by Blackridge, and their willingness to describe the specific instructions they had received that night, documented destruction of evidence in a federal survey facility, was the kind of willingness that comes from understanding that the person who sent you up the mountain is not going to protect you from what happens next. Sheriff Rourke had not yet given a statement. He was sitting in the back of a state vehicle, looking at the window, looking at nothing. He had the expression of a man who has spent enough time in law enforcement to understand exactly how this situation is classified and exactly what it means for the remaining years of his professional life. Grace was with her father during his statement, sitting slightly behind him, present, but not intruding the way she had been beside him in every important moment tonight. Not leading, not following, but there. Exactly there. Cole gave his statement to a young investigator named Pacheco, who asked good questions and wrote fast and didn't flinch at any of the specifics. Cole was thorough and sequential and included every detail: the shell company, his father's sale, Voss's deliberate choice, the jammer, the explosive charge, the checkpoint, the race to the bunker, the 2 men with the incendiary device. All of it in order with timestamps confirmed by the convoy's camera logs. When he finished, Pacheco reviewed his notes for a moment. Then he looked up. "Mr. Mercer, you had 170 people on this mountain tonight. You transmitted evidence to the media, to federal investigators, to the state attorney general. You neutralized an explosive device, documented a blocked county road located, and retrieved an imprisoned witness, and secured approximately 30 boxes of fraudulent business records." He paused. "Is there anything else?" Cole thought about it seriously. "My supply convoy never made the delivery run we were planning when all of this started. There are mountain families who need those supplies. I'd like to get back to that as soon as my people are released." Pacheco wrote that down. Cole wasn't sure why, but the investigators seemed to think it was relevant. At 4:15 in the morning, with the sky still completely dark and the blizzard finally beginning to thin, slightly, not stopping, but losing some of its conviction, Commissioner Everett Voss was formally placed under arrest. The charges, read in the quiet voice of a state officer who had been doing this job long enough to not need drama to make it land, included conspiracy to commit fraud, falsification of public records, organized corruption of county survey processes, unlawful imprisonment, evidence destruction, and obstruction of justice. Voss did not say anything when the charges were read. His attorney said something about cooperating with the investigation that everyone present understood to mean the opposite. Rourke was arrested separately on charges of obstruction and abuse of official authority. The Blackridge mining executives named in Daniel's records would be located and charged in the following 48 hours. But the process that made those charges possible that started in this moment, on this mountain, in this blizzard, with these people. Grace watched Voss being led to a state vehicle. Cole was beside her. She did not look triumphant. She did not look relieved in the simple, uncomplicated way that relief sometimes looks. She looked like someone who is standing at the end of something very long and very hard and is taking a moment to actually stand there to be present for the end of it rather than immediately converting it into the next task. My father is going to need months of medical care, she said. He'll get it, Cole said. The families who lost their land, they'll need legal representation. The restitution process could take years. It will take years, Cole said honestly, but it'll happen. You gave the investigators everything they need to make it happen. Grace was quiet for a moment. 11 years, she said. 14 families. Some of them were gone before anyone knew what was being done to them. Some of them gave up on ever getting it back. She turned to look at the state vehicle where Voss now sat. He built something that lasted 11 years, and my father spent 8 months taking it apart. And you spent 18 days making sure the work survived, Cole said. She looked at him. We spent one night making sure it survived. Cole accepted that. Yeah, we did. Decker appeared with 2 cups of coffee, real coffee from a thermos in the supply truck, the first hot thing most of them had had since the clubhouse. He handed one to Cole and one to Grace and said, "The Anderson family on the supply list. I got through to them on the radio 20 minutes ago. They're fine. They've got 2 weeks of propane left." Cole exhaled, and Harmon Briggs answered his radio when I called the cabin frequency. Apparently his phone died and his charger broke. He's been reading for 3 days and says the quiet has been wonderful. Decker's voice was completely drawn. He wanted to know why we were calling at 4 a.m. Cole almost laughed. It surprised him to laugh its nearness, but that was what tonight had been. Explosive charges and missing surveyors and 11 years of fraud and a 20-year-old woman walking 8 miles through a blizzard and a biker named Harmon Briggs with a broken charger who had been reading quietly for 3 days and thought the quiet was wonderful. Life did not organize itself into clean categories. "Tell him we'll be by with supplies in the next few days," Cole said. Already did. The sky had started somewhere far to the east to move from absolute black toward the first dark edge of something that was not yet light, but was the promise of it. The blizzard was thinning. The mountain was still cold and still and present in the way mountains are without opinion, without acknowledgement, simply there. Daniel Holloway came to stand between Cole and Grace. Steadier now, the IV removed a thick jacket that Renner had produced from the medical van over his shoulders. He looked at the state vehicles, at the evidence teams, at the 170 bikers who were still present, some giving statements, some helping with equipment, some simply standing in the cold because they had come up this mountain together and leaving before the thing was finished didn't occur to them. He looked at Cole. "My daughter told me what you said," he said, "when she told you about the first land parcel, about your father's name on the deed." Cole waited. "She said you didn't hesitate," Daniel said. "You said it didn't change what you were willing to do that night. It only changed what you'd have to answer for afterward." "That's right," Cole said. Daniel was quiet for a moment. The wind moved through the space between them. "I've spent 8 months building a case against powerful men. I've been very careful about evidence, about documentation, about making sure everything I put in front of investigators could survive scrutiny, because I knew that the people I was documenting would use every tool available to discredit what I found." He paused. "The hardest thing in that kind of work isn't finding the evidence. It's being willing to include the evidence you didn't want to find. The part that implicates someone you didn't expect, or someone who didn't deserve it, or someone whose name makes the story more complicated." He looked at Cole directly. "You included your father's name. You walked the investigators through the shell company before they found it on their own. You made the story more complicated because it was true." "It was the right thing to do," Cole said. "Yes," Daniel said, "it was, but right isn't always easy and it's not always comfortable, and a lot of people in your position would have found a reason to let the investigators find it themselves and then claim they simply hadn't thought to mention it." He put his hand out. "I want to shake your hand, Mr. Mercer, not because you found me, because of the kind of man you were while you were finding me." Cole shook his hand. It was a simple gesture, a dry, firm handshake in the cold at 4:30 in the morning on a Montana mountain that had just finished being the center of something. Not a ceremony, not a moment designed for significance. Just 2 men who had both spent that night doing what needed doing, shaking hands at the end of it. Grace watched them and didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Forsyth returned to Cole at 4:45 with a tablet showing a preliminary document count from the bunker. 31 boxes of physical evidence, 217 digital files accessed through Daniel's server, 4 hours and 17 minutes of audio recordings across multiple devices. "We're going to be here for a while," she said. "But I want you to know the transmitted evidence was what triggered the warrants. We had enough from the transmission alone to come up here. Everything else is corroboration and expansion." She paused. "Your communication person, Carla Vasquez," Cole said. "She transmitted under active jamming conditions through a terrain that should have blocked everything. The signal was weak, but it was consistent, and it was time-stamped, and it held up through 90 minutes of continuous broadcast." Forsyth looked at him. "How?" "She boosted the output and used a long-range antenna and got the signal above the tree line," Cole said. "She's been running convoy communications for 7 years. She knows more about radio and difficult terrain than anyone I've ever met." Forsyth nodded, making a note. I'd like her contact information for the technical record." "She'll be happy to provide it." The morning arrived slowly and without drama, the way mornings do in Montana in January. Not a sunrise so much as a gradual admission of light, the sky going from black to dark gray to the particular blue-gray of a winter dawn that doesn't promise warmth but at least delivers visibility. By 6 in the morning, the convoy began its descent in stages. Not fleeing, not retreating, moving in the organized way of people who have completed a thing and are going back to whatever comes next. 2 trucks stayed behind at Forsyth's request, their occupants volunteering to remain as witnesses for the initial evidence processing. Everyone else moved down the mountain. Grace rode in the lead truck with her father, who had been cleared to travel by Renner, on the condition that he go directly to the hospital in Greyhaven for a full evaluation. He agreed without argument, which was itself a kind of medical data. Daniel Holloway arguing with a medical recommendation was clearly more characteristic than Daniel Holloway accepting one. He fell asleep somewhere on the descent, his head against the window, and Grace sat beside him and watched the mountains pass and did not fall asleep because she had not yet reached the stage where sleep felt available. Her mind was still running on the evidence, on the investigators, on the families who had lost land, on the list of everything that needed to happen next, on her father's voice on the recorder saying, "I did what needed doing, make sure it matters." Cole rode at the rear of the convoy. He was quiet on the descent. Decker was driving and did not push conversation, which was the right call. Cole sat with the night, not reviewing it for mistakes, not planning what came next, just sitting with the full weight of it for the minutes he had before they reached the bottom of the mountain and everything became something to be dealt with. He thought about his father. Robert Mercer had sold land on Silver Crown 12 years ago, in the year after Cole's mother died, probably because he needed the money and the land had sat unused and the offer had been fair and there was no reason to be suspicious. He had never known what the sale became. He had died 4 years later without knowing. And Everett Voss had chosen that transaction deliberately, had placed Robert Mercer's name at the beginning of a fraud because a Mercer in the deed provided both a legal foundation and a human deterrent. Cole's father had been used, and then buried in the paperwork of 11 years of crime. There was anger in that realization. Cole felt it clearly and without apology. But underneath the anger was something else, a kind of resolution, the clean, hard feeling of a thing being set right. His father's name was in Voss's fraud, and now his father's name was in the investigation that had just brought that fraud down. Both were true. Both would be on the record. The second truth did not erase the first, but it answered it. It turned Robert Mercer's unwitting connection to something corrupt into a thread that, when pulled, helped unravel the whole thing. That was not nothing. Cole thought his father would have understood that. At the base of the mountain, as the convoy reached the county road and the lights of Greyhaven became visible in the gray morning distance, Decker spoke for the first time in 40 minutes. "Supply run, yeah," he said. "We still have the trucks loaded." "After the hospital," Cole said. "We get Daniel checked in, make sure Grace has what she needs, and then we run the supplies." "The families have been waiting." "They've been waiting through the storm," Cole said. "They can wait 2 more hours while we make sure the man who spent 8 months trying to protect their land is actually going to be all right." Decker drove in silence for a moment. "You know the county is going to be without a sheriff," he said. "For a while. And a commissioner. For a while longer. That's a lot of administrative infrastructure to replace in a mountain county in winter. It is, Cole said. Decker waited. Is that something we're going to get involved in? Cole looked at the lights of Gray Haven in the distance, at the gray morning pressing down on the valley, at the mountain behind them which had given up its secret and now looked in the early light exactly like what it had always been, a mountain indifferent, impermanent, containing nothing more or less than what had always been there. We're going to stay in Gray Haven for a while, Cole said, until things are steady. There are roofs that need repair, and witnesses who need escorts to court, and families who have been cut off from supply runs for 2 months because the roads they used were declared unsafe by a man who had been paid to declare them unsafe. He paused. So yeah, we're getting involved. Decker made the sound again, not quite a laugh, but close. Figured, he said. The convoy rolled into Gray Haven as the morning opened up over the valley, and Cole Mercer rode into it thinking about his father and about a 20-year-old woman who had walked 8 miles through a blizzard, and about the specific weight of choosing to tell the truth about things that make the truth more complicated. That weight did not feel like a burden. It felt like something worth carrying. Daniel Holloway spent 4 days in Gray Haven Regional Hospital, and every one of those days, Grace spent more hours in that building than outside it. She slept in the chair beside his bed the first night, and the nurses let her because they understood, without being told, that she had earned that chair in a way that made the visiting hours policy feel beside the point. By the second day, Daniel was arguing with the attending physician about his diet, which Renner confirmed was the single most reliable indicator of genuine recovery he had encountered in 14 years of emergency medicine. The hospital room became in those 4 days something close to a command center. State investigators came twice a day with questions and updates. Forsyth visited personally on the second morning and spread a series of printed documents across Daniel's bedside table while he sat up in the bed eating hospital oatmeal and looking at the documents with the focused attention of a man reviewing his own work product, which was exactly what he was doing. The digital files corroborate everything in the physical records, Forsyth told him. The boundary alterations are documented across 6 different survey cycles. Your coordinate comparisons show the specific points where the official county maps diverge from the original federal survey data. She paused. This is 8 months of exceptional work, Mr. Holloway. It should have been someone else's job, Daniel said. I'm a county surveyor. What I found should have been found by the county oversight process. The county oversight process was being run by the person you were investigating. Yes, Daniel said, that's the problem. Grace was standing at the window during this conversation, her back to the room, listening. She had learned in childhood that her father thought better when he didn't feel observed, and she had made a quiet art of being present without being intrusive. She was doing it now. What happens to the families? She asked without turning around. Forsyth looked at her. The land returns to them. The fraudulent transfers are void. It's not a simple process. There are court filings, title restorations, property reassessments, but the legal outcome is not in question. Blackridge's acquisitions in the Silver Crown Zone were built on falsified public records, and the falsification is documented beyond any reasonable dispute. How long? Grace asked. Forsyth chose honesty over comfort. For the full restitution process to complete 2 years, maybe 3 for the cases with additional complications. Grace turned from the window. Some of these families have been off their land for 7 years. I know, Forsyth said. She didn't offer anything additional. She was not a woman who softened facts with language that didn't earn its place. Daniel set down his spoon. What about the families who sold under duress and used the proceeds to start over somewhere else? They can't just return to land they've built a new life away from. That's where the financial restitution component becomes critical, Forsyth said. The payment ledgers your daughter secured from the bunker document every transaction, what Blackridge paid for each property versus the assessed value plus the documented losses each family incurred through the manufactured unsafe property declarations. The difference constitutes damages. She paused. The dollar figure across all 14 families is substantial. How substantial? Daniel asked. Forsyth told him the number. Grace turned back to the window. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Voss had access to that number for 11 years, he said slowly. He knew exactly what he owed those families. He knew it every single day he went to work at the county office, and he kept going. Yes, Forsyth said. Then I want to make sure the restitution process is public, Daniel said. Not just the amount, the details. Which family, which property, which specific fraudulent action caused, which specific loss. I want it on the record in a form that the people who were harmed can read and understand and use. He looked at Forsyth. They deserve to know exactly what was done to them. Not just that something wrong happened, the specifics, the names, the dates, the amounts, the decisions Voss made on the exact days he made them. Forsyth made a note, Arbantu. I can work with the county records office on a public documentation process. Good, Daniel said. He picked up his spoon. Now, can someone explain to me why this oatmeal has no salt? By the third day, Cole had organized the supply runs. The trucks that had sat loaded through the night of the mountain operation were finally delivering what they had originally been packed for propane medicine canned goods. Children's boots, the practical necessities of winter life in mountain communities that the county road system had been neglecting. The Hells Angles ran 4 routes over 3 days, covering every family on their original list, plus 6 additional households that Grace had identified from her father's notebooks. Families who lived near the disputed land and had experienced their own version of county neglect during the years of the fraud. Harmon Briggs, the retired schoolteacher, who had been peacefully unreachable for 5 days, due to a broken phone charger, opened his cabin door to find 4 bikers on his porch with a generator, 3 months of propane, and enough groceries to last until spring. He looked at them for a long moment and then said, with the unhurried courtesy of a man who has lived alone long enough to not be surprised by much, I suppose you better come in. He fed them venison stew and told stories about the mountain for 2 hours, and Decker Walsh described it afterward as the best 2 hours of the entire week, which given the week was a statement that said something real about Harmon Briggs. On the 4th day, Daniel was discharged. Cole was in the hospital parking lot when Grace brought her father out. He had not planned to be there. He had dropped something off for Renner at the hospital entrance, and the timing had simply aligned. Daniel walked out under his own power slowly but steadily, his arm linked through Grace's. He looked at the gray January sky with the specific quality of attention that people give to ordinary things after they have been deprived of them long enough to understand that ordinary is not a diminishment. He saw Cole and stopped. You didn't have to wait, he said. I wasn't waiting, Cole said. I was dropping off paperwork. He paused. But I'm glad you're out. Daniel walked to him. He was steadier than he'd been on the mountain, but there was still a fragility to his movement that would take months to fully resolve, and all 3 of them understood that without saying it. I've been thinking about something, he said. What's that? The bunker. What it was originally built for. He looked at Cole directly. It was a federal emergency facility designed to function as a survival shelter when everything else failed. And for 11 years, Blackridge used it as a vault for the records of their crimes. He paused. I want to reclaim it, not as a crime scene, not as a historical curiosity, as what it was designed to be, an emergency shelter. Cole looked at him. Properly equipped, Daniel continued, food, medical supplies, communication equipment, backup power. A resource for mountain families who get caught in exactly the kind of situation those families have been in, isolated, cut off without reliable county response. He watched Cole's face. I know it takes time. I know there's a restoration process and a jurisdiction question and probably 6 months of paperwork, but it's the right use for that space. It is, Cole said. He thought about it for a moment. The club has construction contacts, people who've done mountain work. If you can navigate the federal jurisdiction question, we can help with the physical work. Daniel nodded. That's what I was hoping you'd say. Grace watched the 2 of them making plans on a hospital parking lot in January and felt something that she did not have an immediate word for, a kind of warmth that was not sentimental and not simple, but was specifically the feeling of watching 2 people who had never met before, one blizzard night, building something together that neither of them could build alone. The weeks that followed were not quiet. They were not supposed to be quiet, and everyone who had been on the mountain understood that the dramatic climax of the night itself was only the first chapter of the work that needed doing. Climaxes are easy in their way. They have shape and momentum, and they end. What comes after the climax is harder because it's slower and more granular and doesn't have the adrenaline of the blizzard to carry it. Commissioner Everett Voss entered a preliminary hearing in the 3rd week of February. The recording of his office conversation with Daniel had been officially entered into evidence. and its contents, when summarized in the court filing, appeared in the Grey Haven Courier under a headline that the paper's editor had reportedly written and rewritten 4 times before settling on the plainest version. Cole read it at the clubhouse over coffee and did not feel the satisfaction he might have expected. He felt something more complicated, the particular flatness that comes after a long effort when the effort has succeeded and you discover that success, like everything else, simply leads to the next thing. Sheriff Rourke resigned his position before his own hearing rather than face the formal removal process. The resignation did not change the criminal charges against him, which proceeded on their own timeline, but it cleared the way for an interim appointment and then a special election that Grey Haven spent 2 months talking about with the intensity that small communities reserve for decisions that actually affect their daily lives. The Blackridge Mining Corporation's permits were suspended pending investigation. 3 executives were charged federally. The company's operations on Silver Crown Mountain ceased entirely, and the equipment they had staged for an expanded mining operation, equipment that Daniel's notebooks had documented without fully understanding its purpose, equipment that explained why Blackridge had been so urgently committed to securing those 14 properties, sat idle in the snow, while the legal process decided what happened next. Grace learned about the mining equipment from Forsyth during a meeting in the 3rd week. She was sitting across from the investigator in the state field office in Grey Haven, a temporary setup in a borrowed conference room, maps and document printouts covering every available surface, and Forsyth slid a photograph across the table. This was staged on the north face, Forsyth said. Blackridge had geological survey data, their own, not the falsified county data showing a significant ore deposit beneath Silver Crown. Not silver, copper, and rare earth elements. The kind of deposit that doesn't come along often. She paused. The 14 family properties weren't just land they wanted. They were the access corridor to an extraction operation worth potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. Grace looked at the photograph for a long time. My father found boundary fraud, she said finally. He didn't know what the boundary fraud was protecting. Nobody did, Forsyth said. Not until we pulled Blackridge's internal geological files off the server. 14 families lost their land, Grace said. People lost homes that had been in their families for generations because a company needed an access corridor to a mine that hasn't been dug yet. She stopped. And Voss knew. The whole time he knew what he was selling them out for. He had a percentage agreement, Forsyth said, in writing in the files. 15% of net extraction revenue paid through a series of offshore accounts. She looked at Grace directly. He was going to be very wealthy. Instead of which, Grace said, Forsyth agreed. Grace sat with this for a moment, the full shape of it finally visible. 14 families, 1 geological survey, 1 corrupt commissioner, and a mountain that had been covering a fortune that Voss had decided belonged to him, and the company willing to pay for his cooperation. 11 years. And her father had found it by being too careful and too honest to look at discrepancies in survey coordinates and simply move on. I want the families to know about the deposit, Grace said. Forsyth looked at her carefully. The mineral rights are complicated. I understand the mineral rights are complicated. I'm studying land law. I understand it will take time, and it may not resolve the way anyone hopes. Grace kept her voice steady. But those families deserve to know what was underneath the land they were driven off of. Not just that they were defrauded. Why they were defrauded, the specific value of what was taken from them. She met Forsyth's eyes. My father spent 8 months documenting the mechanism of the fraud. I want the families to understand the motive. Forsyth made a note. I'll make sure it's part of the public record in terms that a non-specialist can read. Thank you, Grace said. She left the meeting and called Cole. He answered on the second ring. She could hear engine noise in the background. He was on his bike, which meant he was thinking, which was what he did when he needed to process something. Grace had learned this in 3 weeks of watching him. Blackridge wasn't just buying land, she said without preamble. They were buying access to a copper and rare earth deposit under Silver Crown, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. Voss had a percentage deal. A silence. Then, that's why they moved so fast when your father got close. That's why they were willing to do everything they did, Grace said. The jammer, the charge in the snowbank, locking my father in a maintenance chamber for 18 days. The bulldozer order. She paused. People do terrible things for money, But they do the worst things when the money is large enough to feel like it justifies the cost. It never does, Cole said. No, Grace said. It never does. Another silence. The engine noise in the background steadied. Are you all right? He asked. It was a simple question, and she took it seriously the way she had learned to take simple questions seriously because the simple ones were usually the ones that required the most honest answer. I'm angry, she said. In a way I wasn't before. I knew Voss was corrupt. I knew he had hurt people. But understanding that the families were removed from land that was sitting on a fortune, that he looked at 14 families and looked at a geological survey and chose the survey, she stopped. That's a different kind of thing. Yeah, Cole said. It is. I'm going to do something about the mineral rights question, she said. I don't know exactly what yet, but I'm going to find out if there's a legal mechanism that connects the fraud to the resource rights, if families who were defrauded out of land have any claim on what was underneath it. Is that what the civil engineering and land law study is about? It's what it's about now, Grace said. Cole was quiet for a moment. Your father would say that sounds like a plan. My father would say it sounds like 8 more months of careful documentation, Grace said. Which is probably right. She heard something in the background that might have been Cole almost laughing. Let me know what you find, he said. I will. She hung up and stood on the sidewalk outside the state field office for a moment, letting the cold settle around her. January was almost over. The blizzard that had brought them all to this point was long past, but Silver Crown Mountain was still there, visible from where she stood, white-capped and permanent and no longer secret. The families began returning to Grey Haven in February. Not all of them, some had built new lives elsewhere, and the return was more complicated than a geographic decision. But 8 of the 14 families came back, and their coming back was the kind of thing that didn't make national news, but carried the specific weight of justice that is measured in people rather than headlines. The Andersons came first. 3 generations of them, the grandparents who had sold their property under the manufactured unsafe declaration 7 years ago, their daughter and son-in-law who had been running a small cattle operation when the county condemned their land, and 4 grandchildren who had grown up hearing about a mountain property they had never seen. They drove into Grey Haven on a Thursday morning in 2 trucks and a trailer, and the grandparents got out of the first truck and stood in the parking lot of the county office building, where they had once been told their land was unsafe and uninhabitable, and neither of them said anything for a long moment. Cole was there. Grace was there. Daniel was there, walking now without assistance and carrying a folder of restored property documents that the court had formally issued the day before. He handed the folder to Earl Anderson, who was 71 years old and had the hands of a man who had worked that land for 40 years before losing it. Earl Anderson opened the folder and looked at the document inside. He read it slowly. His wife Dot read it beside him, her arm through his. Then Earl Anderson looked at Daniel and said, "Is this real?" "It's real," Daniel said. "That land is yours. It's been yours. The document you're holding is the court's formal acknowledgement of what was always true." Earl Anderson looked at the document again. He was quiet for a long time. Then he folded it carefully, put it back in the folder, and handed it to Dot. He turned to Cole. "I heard you brought 170 people up that mountain in a blizzard," he said. 170, Cole confirmed, "for a girl you'd never met and a man you didn't know." "For the right thing," Cole said, which turned out to involve both of them. Earl Anderson put his hand out. Cole shook it. And then Earl Anderson did something Cole had not expected. He pulled him into a brief, firm embrace, the kind that men of his generation give when words have run out of room. Cole held it for a moment. He had been told thank you in many ways over many years. This was different. This was the weight of 7 years and 40 acres, and a family that had stopped believing the land would come back, and the embrace held all of that without needing to explain any of it. When Earl stepped back, his eyes were wet. He didn't apologize for it. "What do we owe you?" he asked. "Nothing," Cole said. "That's not nothing," Cole said again. "Come home. Fix what needs fixing. That's all we need from you." The Hells Angles stayed in Grey Haven through the end of March. They repaired roofs on 3 of the returning family properties. They cleared road access that had been blocked by deliberate neglect during the fraud years. They ran monthly supply convoys to every mountain household on their route. They showed up when witnesses needed transportation to court dates in the county seat, and they showed up early and waited as long as necessary and drove people home after. And they never once mentioned that this was outside any job description they had ever signed on for. A local woman named Petra Vasquez, no relation to Carla, wrote a piece in the Greyhaven Courier about the Hells Angles that was not about the blizzard night and the rescue and the dramatic mountain operation. It was about the weeks after, about showing up to fix Earl Anderson's barn roof on a Tuesday when there were no cameras, about the day 3 bikers spent 4 hours helping Dot Anderson's daughter and son-in-law clear 7 years of brush from their restored pasture land, about Decker Walsh teaching Harmon Briggs's neighbor how to repair a generator because Briggs's neighbor was 80 years old and lived alone, and the county's emergency response system had been managed by people who were now under federal indictment. Petra sent Cole a copy of the piece before it ran. He read it once, set it down, picked it up again, and read it a second time. Then he called her and said, "You didn't have to write about the after." "The after is the story," Petra said. "Anybody can show up for the dramatic part. The after is where you find out who people actually are." Cole thought about that for a long time after he hung up. In April, the Holloway Mountain Protection Project held its first workshop. Grace had spent 3 months organizing it, working with Forsyth's office to compile the legal framework for mountain landowners, working with a Missoula attorney who had agreed to provide pro bono legal support, working with Daniel on the documentation protocols that would form the core of the project's approach. The workshop was held in the Greyhaven Community Center, a building that needed new heating and had chairs that didn't match, and terrible coffee, and was full, on a Saturday morning in April with 53 people. Not all of them were from Greyhaven. 12 drove from neighboring counties where similar, smaller-scale boundary irregularities had been quietly suspected for years, but never formally investigated. 3 came from as far as 200 miles away after reading Petra Vasquez's piece in the Courier, which had been picked up by the state paper and circulated more widely than anyone in Greyhaven had anticipated. Grace stood at the front of the room and looked at the people in the mismatched chairs and felt the specific quality of a moment that is not what you imagined it would be and is better than you imagined it would be in ways you didn't have the vocabulary to anticipate. "My father spent 8 months documenting a fraud," she said. "He did it because it was his job and because it was right and because that's the kind of man he is. He didn't do it because he knew how it would end. He did it because the evidence was there and someone needed to follow it." She paused. "This project is not about what happened on Silver Crown Mountain. It's about making sure that the next county surveyor who finds a discrepancy, the next family that gets a condemnation notice, the next landowner who feels like something is wrong but doesn't know how to prove it has somewhere to go, has a process, has people." She looked at the room. "Nobody should have to walk 8 miles in a blizzard to find help. That's what this project is for." Daniel was sitting in the 3rd row. He was looking at his daughter with an expression that contained everything he had ever hoped she would become and the specific astonishment of a parent who discovers that their child has become it. Cole was in the back row. He had not planned to attend the workshop. It was Grace's project and Daniel's project, and the club had already given everything it had to give. But Grace had called him 2 days before and said simply, "I'd like you to be there." And he had found that this was sufficient reason. He sat in the back row and listened to her talk about land law and documentation protocols and the legal mechanisms for reporting survey irregularities. And he thought about the night he had shaken her hand in the parking lot of the hospital, and the night before that when she had stood in his clubhouse doorway with frozen hands and said 3 words. After the workshop, Daniel found him in the parking lot. "She's going to be very good at this," Daniel said. "She already is," Cole said. Daniel nodded. He had a particular kind of quiet that he settled into when he was deciding whether to say something. Cole had learned to recognize it. "The bunker restoration starts next month," Daniel said. "The federal jurisdiction question was resolved last week. The structure is being reclassified as a public emergency facility under the County Emergency Management Office, which is currently being rebuilt from the ground up." He paused. "The plaque I want to put near the entrance, I've been thinking about what it should say." "What did you decide?" "Something my daughter said to me in the hospital. I don't think she knew I would use it, but I wrote it down that morning." He looked at Cole. "She said nobody should have to walk 8 miles in a blizzard to find help." Cole was quiet for a moment. "That's the right thing to put on it," he said. "I thought so too." They stood in the April parking lot in the first real warmth of the year, the mountain visible above the town, white still on the high faces but losing ground to the season. 6 months had passed since the night that had changed everything. 6 months of hearings and restitution filings and supply convoys and roof repairs and workshops and a project built by a 20-year-old woman who had started it with a map and 3 words and 8 miles of blizzard behind her. In June, the first families broke ground on the land that had been returned to them. Earl Anderson rebuilt the fence line of his pasture on a morning in early June with his son-in-law and 2 of his grandchildren, and when they drove the first post into the ground, Earl Anderson stood back and looked at the mountain above him and did not say anything. He did not need to say anything. The post was in the ground. The land was his. The fence would go where he put it, and where he put it would be where it was always supposed to be, on property that had carried his family's name for 3 generations, before Everett Voss decided it was worth more to someone else than to them. Cole rode by the Anderson property that morning on his way through the valley. He saw Earl Anderson at the fence line. He slowed down. Earl looked up and raised one hand, a simple acknowledgement from one person to another across the distance of a field, and Cole raised a hand back, and that was all. He kept riding. The summer passed and Greyhaven rebuilt itself, not dramatically, not with a ceremony, but in the way that communities rebuild when the damage was real and the people doing the work are the same people who live there. The county office got new leadership. The road maintenance program was reviewed and expanded. The emergency response system was overhauled with the input from mountain residents who had been managing without it for too long. In October, Daniel Holloway walked into the restored bunker at Silver Crown Mountain for the first time since the night he had walked out of it. He walked in accompanied by Grace and by Cole and by a county emergency management official who was there to formally designate the facility as operational. The interior had been cleaned, reinforced, equipped with new communication systems, a medical supply cache, emergency food stores, and a backup generator with 6 months of fuel. Near the entrance, mounted on the wall at a height where it could be read without bending, was a small plaque. Daniel stood in front of it and read the words he had chosen. Nobody should have to walk 8 miles in a blizzard to find help. He stood there for a long moment. Grace put her arm through his. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm very okay," Daniel said. He meant it in the complete sense, the way you say something when it has multiple layers and you want all of them to be heard. They walked out of the bunker together into the October afternoon, the mountain above them, moving into the first colors of another winter. In January, when the anniversary of the blizzard night came around without announcement, the Hells Angels returned to Greyhaven with a full convoy of supplies equipment. Their people the same organized warmth they had been running every winter for 15 years. Cole rode at the front this time, and Decker rode beside him, and behind them came 170 motorcycles and trucks moving through the valley roads in the particular sound that 170 engines make together. A sound that the mountain families had come to associate with the certainty of being remembered. Grace was standing on the repaired porch of the Holloway cabin with her father when the convoy came into view below them. Daniel had heard the engines first. His hearing, always sharp, had recovered fully, and he had stood up from his chair and said simply, "They're here." Grace came out beside him. She watched the convoy move through the valley headlights. Lights in the January afternoon, the same sound that had once gone up the mountain toward a secret and was now coming through the valley toward people who were home. Cole pulled to the front of the cabin and stopped. Grace walked down from the porch. She was carrying a rolled map under her arm, new printed at the university where she was now in her second year of civil engineering and land law studies. She had made it herself, compiled from public records, satellite data, and Daniel's original field notes. Every emergency shelter in the region, marked and coordinated with access routes and seasonal road conditions, annotated in the careful, precise handwriting she had inherited from her father. She handed it to Cole. He unrolled it and looked at it. "You made this yourself," he said. "First project of the semester," Grace said. "My professor said it was overqualified for a class assignment." She paused. "I told him it was for a friend." Cole looked at the map for a long moment. Every shelter, every access road, every family property in the mountain zone documented with the kind of care that made the truth hard to hide and the need hard to ignore. "You know where all these roads go?" he asked. Grace looked at the mountain above them, at the valley below, at the convoy of 170 people who had followed her into a blizzard because she had asked and because they were the kind of people who stepped forward when stepping forward was what was needed. She smiled. "I do," she said. Then she looked at Cole with the same quiet certainty she had carried through 8 miles of blizzard, through 18 days of fear, through every hearing and every workshop and every early morning when the weight of it had been real and she had carried it anyway. "Follow me," she said, and the convoy moved. Because one frightened young woman had walked 8 miles through a blizzard to knock on the right door, and 170 people had stepped forward without being asked twice, and a father had survived 18 days on emergency rations, and the unshakable belief that the truth was worth the cost of finding it. The mountain had given up its secret, 14 families had come home, and a community that had been quietly stolen from had been loudly, publicly, permanently given back to itself. Courage does not require certainty. It requires only the willingness to take the next step when the next step is the right one, and to keep taking it until the thing that needs doing is done. Grace Holloway had taken the first step in a blizzard with frozen hands in 3 words. The rest of them had simply followed.